So while we wait for our guest lecturer to, to start, how's everybody feeling today, with the weather? It's crazy, right? Yeah, it's crazy, I wish we could have, physical class, but because of the situation, everywhere is like, so I knew they were going to cancel the class before I even, I sent them my message earlier, but I knew the school authority is going to cancel because of what's actually, going on in town today. But I hope nobody's actually caught like on ground. Like, are you where? I know Lauren, you were supposed to, yeah, like you were on campus, right? You're on ground, and I hope it wasn't too difficult for you to get to, where you are streaming from
It was
now.
slippery. It was
Okay. Oh,
slippery everywhere.
wow. So sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The our guest speaker for today. Okay, Sumto, are you ready?
Yeah, I am. My bad.
Okay, it's fine.
Hi.
So hello everyone. I'm happy we are able to like, to come online. So, and my guest speaker or lecturer for today is Somto Ajuluchuku. So, Somto is a very, important name in Nigerian digital ambience. So Zomto is actually, the founder of Vortex Corporation, and this is a kind of creative content and entertainment company, that is into comic, animations, and also film. So, and Somto is also, a member of Cartoonist Organization of Nigeria. That is, Cartoonist Association of Nigeria. And we've met for like, I think it should be like a decade, now. Yeah. So, and since we've met, I've been actually looking for the opportunity to bring Somto to my class, to like, give my talk to my students about his experience in the industry. So, but I couldn't make that happen at University of Lagos. It was so difficult. Sometimes I may not be around. It was, so, and but I'm happy that, we are able to like, bring him, to talk to us at University of Virginia. So we really appreciate that. Thank you so much, for giving us this opportunity, Sumto. So, and this class is about digital arts of Africa. So we are looking at the theories, philosophy, and also, creative aspect of the digital arts, that are produced by Africans in the diaspora and also Africans, on ground, I mean, in on the continent. So, and for today's class, students have actually read up your bio, those that we could, get online. And we've also read an article by Professor Yute Fendler, from Bayreuth University on animation generally. So, and your presentation today concerning your background, your creative strategy, and everything is going to, give us other dimension into different forms of digital arts and digitality in Africa. So we're gonna have like 30 minutes of your presentation, and students are gonna have like 20 minutes to ask questions. Yeah. So thank you so much, Somto. You have the floor.
Thank you so much for having me. To be
We can't hear
you
you.
know, oh, can you hear me now? Hello?
Wait, I can hear him.
I can hear him.
Can you
Okay.
can you guys hear him?
Yes.
Yes.
Really? What's going on? Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, you can hear now.
I
Okay,
can hear you now.
cool.
Okay.
That's like maybe our Nigeria connection recognizing each other and being like, nah, I ain't
Maybe.
gonna work.
Yeah.
Um, well, hi guys. It's great to connect with you guys. It's super cool when I see like young, diverse faces in a room. And I can share a little bit about what I do and this crazy thing of ours called comics and animation, right? Um, Where do I even begin? In 2023, I had this exhibition I did with the Alliance Française, and in as much as we were supposed to like put together a platform where we could showcase our works of Vortex. Let me step back and reintroduce myself, right? Like he said, I'm Somto Ajuluchuku. I'm from Nigeria, the eastern part of Nigeria. Our tribe is a tribe called the Igbo people. We speak Igbo as our language. Um, and I started Vortex, which is a creative content company that's keen on exporting African culture through comic books, animation, and interactive media. I started it 10 years ago. And since then, we've published over 200 comic books. We've made several short films, both commissioned and originals, over 20 of them. And we've created a lot of digital content in the augmented reality space. And yeah, we run an animation studio here based in Lagos, two of them, both located on both sides of the city that I was born in, Lagos City. So we have a studio on the mainland and we have a studio on the island because we look at Vortex as a bridge on building up the talents, and we hope that over the years we can build more studios across the country and at large across the continent. Today, I'm going to try to sort of give you a view on the animation space and the comic book space by giving you an insight into what we're doing predominantly, and then also giving you an overview on the industry by looking at the reports made by uh, 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 an organization called look into a bit of an organization I'm part of, which is called Animate Africa, which also collects a bit of data on the animation space. But I'm going to try to make this fun. Um, what really differentiates African storytelling from making comic books anywhere else? Um, and it's one simple thing. It's the culture, right? It's what differentiates Japanese anime from American cartoons, or it's what differentiates Asterix and Obelix, which is French Belgian, from the Batman comics and the superhero and the Superman comics, which are American, right? Um, so when you think about Tantan and you think about Judge Dredd, it's a whole different universe in terms of the way these characters are illustrated, in terms of the kind of stories they're telling, and most importantly, the topics that are being told, right? So it's all within the storytelling. And I would start by introducing the kind of storytelling that we do uh, at Vortex, right? Um, try to share this.
Okay.
Close this guy. Okay. So before I think this guy. Yes. Okay. Great. Um one second. Let me pause that. We open this because that was a PDF. That was a PowerPoint slide, not the PDF. Okay. Okay. Back to Zoom. Yeah. So the theme that we kind of started pushing in the last 4 years is called Kukwa, which means growth in Swahili. Um, Before that, we had a theme, Mandela's middle name, right? And we came out with that sort of theme at the beginning of my career and at the inception of Vortex because I felt we were fighting for our place in the comic book scene to be recognized. And we had to be viscerally stubborn about our identity for us to make a mark in the industry. And a decade later, I think we've quite done it, right? You see books like Iyanu by Unique Studios that's being produced on Cartoon Network now to be released next month as an animated series made by HBO. This comic book started like 6-7 years ago from an indie publisher who then collaborated with Dark Horse to publish the comic more. And now you see that book making its way into mainstream media as a global IP, right? And it wouldn't have done that if it was just another Wonder Woman or if it was just another, whatever is out there, right? So that was kind of the theme when we got into the space, to be stubborn about our identity, to take nothing less than identifying with who we were exactly and, hold our position. And over time, when we found out that, that was kind of established, we moved forward to think of ways that collaboratively we could grow together as a industry, as a unit, as a people, as a form of storytelling. This kind of gives you insights into, what I already just said. Giving us into over 200 books published, over 30,000 readers daily, over 400,000 reads a month, growing a revenue of $30,000 because it's $5 per subscriber, right? Every month. In the spirit realm, in our storytelling at Vortex, our stories take on 3 pillars. And one of them is spirit fiction, which is the genre of the storytelling that we have coined together to sort of represent our African heritage and our roots. You can think about it as manga or manhwa if you're from Korea, or the Franco-Belgian, if you're from Europe, or the superhero comic genre, the classic comics genre, the action comic genre, as DC Marvel would like to call it, the action comics, right? So the pillars that our storytelling is based off on is spirit fiction, which is the genre. The spirit realm is the settings where most of our stories occur in. And you might, when you think about this in comparison to something, you might understand. How many of us watch anime out here? In case I want to make some references that don't go over everybody's head. Do we watch anime? Let me slide back to my Zoom call. No one watches anime here. Okay, one person. Okay,
I do.
two. Okay. Shout out James. Shout out David. I see you. Um, yeah. But for us that watch anime, there's some there. When you think about the settings of anime, there's a genre called isekai, right? And isekai is basically, I think, when I'm not sure if I'm getting it the other way around, but basically this is when the main character of the story is interacting with a fantasy world from the physical plane, right? And within our storytelling, we have the spirit realm. And when you think about spirit fiction, um, um, spirit fiction is African stories driven by mythology, culture, and traditional spiritual philosophy, right? It means that when we think about our character designs and the way our characters are created, we think about it from what do the masquerades wear from our New Yam festivals, or from the Eyo festival, or from the um, um, Isyogo festivals. We think about the costumes our superheroes will wear from the traditional attires our spiritual leaders would wear. And then that's where we draw that inspiration from. When we think about superpowers, we think about divinities that occur within our spiritual teachings, or the stories that we heard when we were growing up from the bedside of our grandmas, or the stories that we hear around the fireplace when grandpa comes out, with the bushmeats, right? So that really informs what is the core and the heartbeats of spirit fiction, right? So when you think about spirit fiction, you think about, African spirituality, our mythology, and our religion. And when you think about the spirit realm, this is an alternative world where major events of the spirit universe occur. It coexists parallel to today's reality. The stories that we have chosen to tell within Vortex cut across our present day reality, but fusing that with our mythology, with our rich history, and with our sublime cultural heritage. And when you mix all these elements together, you realize that you have an endless, boundless, plethora of storytelling that you can actually tell. And just to run through this, a few of the stories that have currently made waves within our space is Land of Gods, Oru, which follows the story of a 13-year-old girl living in New York, and comes back to Nigeria for the first time to see her grandmother. She discovers a magic mirror which transports her to this mythological world of gods. And for her to come back home, she needs to find 3 crystals and use these 3 crystals to make a mirror to return back home. But these 3 crystals are scattered across this vast world of 9 realms. And she has to discover herself as someone that has never been back home before, or experienced African or Nigerian culture, and at the same time discover a pathway back home. So this kind of is our way of reconnecting with the diaspora, connecting with a lot of Nigerians or Africans who have gone across the Atlantic Ocean for studies, or were born there and are trying to grasp for their roots, or maybe African Americans that have never really connected with their original heritage in the first place, making them understand that it's okay to be ignorant of that, because there's only more to discover. There's only adventure ahead of you. What is the fun if you know it all, right? And that was our way of, building that bridge through storytelling, through spirit fiction. There's a story called Zodiac, which follows the story of Dankaran Keita, a Nigerian boy, but of Mali origins. And he has the ability to manifest the zodiac signs as powers. We were very excited to dive deep to find out how the zodiac signs, although have a lot of the Greek understanding of where its origins are from, actual had core origins from the Dogon tribe in Mali, in Timbuktu, and how a lot of history is shared amongst the world, sometimes originated from Africa, but due to transatlantic slave trade, or due to the traveling of the Moors, which were the scientists, or would you say the explorers of the Northern African tribes, and were able to share this knowledge across leagues and leagues, and oceans apart, from whence this information was actually born. So that's our way of also, exporting that African culture in various ways. Um, we have a story called Ojuju, which kind of places African masquerades on the same pedestal of how you would think about samurais or how you would think about ninjas, of how you would reimagine these Asian cultures and Asian histories and, Asian mythologies, and spirituality and how it has become mainstream. When you think about a samurai, everybody can relate. Like it's become so exported that movies like Kill Bill had a whole backdrop of that culture, right? And this is a full American production made by Quentin Tarantino, an American director, right? But he's so inspired by these cultures that he was able to tap in and draw in on this culture. So from a storytelling perspective, I was very excited to look at the wealth of African masquerades, not just as a spiritual backdrop or cultural backdrop in terms of its dance and its spiritual importance to our society, but be able to reimagine it and fantasize it in terms of action, in terms of spiritual power, spiritual prowess, deepen, creating a hero story within that context and imagining them as the original superheroes, the ones who wore the masks, so you can focus on the dance and the spiritual aspect of their being and their presence, not just the man behind the dance, right? Um, and it goes on and on to think about it in a futuristic sense, where you can think about African storytelling, spirit fiction, in the future, right? In this story here, we begin to see mythological gods reappear in the future. And this is a future where there has been a world war, and the only continent that wasn't affected was the African continent. And the African continent comes together to form a republic called the Moor Republic. And there is a threat from a black hole, from a dark creature which nobody knows its name, which happens to be Eshu, which is the trickster god of the Yoruba Orisha. And these, unknown gods who have began to spring up in normal human beings through artifacts that have been passed through generations have to stand up to this evil that's coming from the black hole. So we see ways that we can make our culture not just and our spirituality and our storytelling, not just items that are reflective of our history or reflective of our mythologies and our spirituality from a traditional sense, but also from a futuristic sense. It informs the way technology can be if we lived in a surrealism without colonialism, right? If there was no influence of foreign cultures on the African continent, what would have our technology advanced to look like in present day? And off the back of that imagination, you're able to think of new design, right? So when creating a story, um, it goes beyond it goes far beyond just thinking about it as entertainment, but thinking about it as the world building, the design of the characters. You involve the fashion, you involve the architecture, you involve the infrastructure. You even begin to involve urban planning and geology when you begin to draw the maps of your world, right? And that's something that we really dive deep into when we were working on Orisha R, because we were able to create spaceships and hovercrafts and laser guns that had to have semblance of African heritage and African sculptures and African arts, you know, from um, from various places, and that really changed the way that we thought about sci-fi. making this project changed how I thought about sci-fi. Like whenever I watch Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever, or Rebel Moon or whatever they're watching these days, it was I was able to begin to put African aspects into that, like, wow, it would be great if Insibidi symbols were in this place, or if Ifa symbols were in this location. And what if this spaceship looked like the old Benin Queen Idia mask, right? And, your imagination becomes unchained, right? And you begin to tap into design that, was never discovered. Thinking about sci-fi, you would, of course, maybe know of the Kizazimoto series that was produced by Disney, where they made an anthology of, I think, 10 reimaginations of African futures, working with animation directors from across Africa, the Uganda, Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe. And a couple colleagues of mine like Raymond Malingo were able to direct some of the projects there called Herder Boy, which was recently nominated for an Annie, and 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 projects like what's his name again, Shof Koka, who made the projects called Morenike, which was nominated recently for a BAFTA, right? And when you begin to think about, how far this imagination can go, where 100-year-old company like Disney, which is a titan of its industry, begins to see the value of this kind of design, begins to see the value within this kind of storytelling, and is able to adapt it into their larger storytelling, because it's a constant search for something fresh, original, and new, right? Giving into an insight on what the market is like, when you think about comic books. I'm going to just give a taste into our software, which we made for distributing comic books across Africa, called vortex247.com. I'm going to put it in the chat so all of y'all can check it out. Let me see. This kind of gives you into, like, okay, what the business of making these comics are like, what the problems we're facing are within the space. You think about distribution, value exchange, funding, and how we begin to solve these problems through technology, because technology and arts, the fusion of both is really going to change our world, really going to change the way we think of our world. What is really interesting for me to show you on this slide is a bit of our numbers and a bit of how far African stories are traveling using our platform as a case study, right? When you think about our consumer base, some of our largest consumer bases in the America, right? And in Europe, right? And the least consumer in Asia, right? And that just shows how universal storytelling is, and how the growth of the industry continues to take form. On our platform alone, we're catering to 73 publishers, right? And we're not scratching the surface of 5% of the current growing space within the animation comic book industry, rather comic book industry, being that I'm talking about comics at the moment. So, you begin to think about, okay, where do these readers come from? And then they're from the Eastern Central Africa. We have 23% from Southern Africa. We have 38% of our publishers from Nigeria, because Nigeria is one of the largest publishers of comic books on the continent. We have 9.5 from UK and Europe in the diaspora, and 19% from the American diaspora. naturally there's a draw of there's a deeper connection or a line that connects the continents with the African American experience deeper than anything I've ever seen. In any diaspora I've interacted with, I feel like, that is a strong link that really like continues to hold, and we see that through their comic books. And, initially when we first launched this platform, we were really keen on publishing African comic books because we felt like there was an underrepresentation, and that was the problem that we were solving. But we realized that we were not going to be able to solve that problem if we don't publish comic books by Afro-American creators in the diaspora that are telling stories that reflect their experience in connection with our cultures and mythologies and spiritualities and storytelling. And so we opened up that window. And what that window was done, that it's more than a business strategy to tap into that market, which it has successfully. But what it has done is it creates an exchange, an exchange of creators to learn from each other, an exchange of creators to connect with each other on storytelling, a desire for creators to come back home and explore and research and dive deeper. It's created investment opportunities for the diaspora to pour into the continent because they're beginning to see stories that resonate with them, not just in their stories of struggle, but in their stories of heritage and glory and glamour and beauty and color and, language and, all these aspects that we enjoy from every other culture, right? It's like watching One Piece, but then you're watching the English dub. It's that's horrible. It's almost a crime, or it's like, we had a screening one time and we couldn't like have the Japanese version of the language. And, we did it at our studio downstairs because we do movie screenings like every Wednesday. And, people were walking out. They were like, no, I'm not going to watch this, you know, um, part of my French, which I was about to speak, but, I'm not going to watch this thing. Right. And, so culture is so important, that proper representation is so key. And, doing it through storytelling is the most powerful way that you can do it because um, that really is the the telescope into the minds of the youth. And that really teleports us into various places across the continent that we might not ever be able to see. Like I've been to Japan a million times through movies, right? Classic movies from Bruce Lee to Jet Li to Jackie Chan, and now through anime, I'm beginning to transport myself to see these places that I never would. I probably haven't still seen to today. I'm still going to go to Japan, inshallah, right? Um, but I have to, I just have to. So I think like you know, that's that's the spirit of it, right? Um, and our readers are 15 to 35 years old, right? And to be quite fair, it goes far beyond that age because we begin to find out that there's a whole boomer culture of readership. The people that love the Superman comics from way back then, and fully experience the underrepresentation of Afro-American cultures or Black cultures within that space, where they only had Black Panther, duking it out with Captain America, or where they would watch, or if you're old enough, you got to see Captain Africa, which probably Sir Jimga would have seen in his time, right? And Captain Africa was like big in the newspapers, right? And like Superman had nothing on Captain Africa. Like you need to see this guy in action, right? And and that was comic books from like way back then that were discontinued. And it really just feeds into that space. And when you think about the business, right? When you think about the numbers, right? Because I mean, I think out of everything that gets me more excited, there's nothing that gets me more excited after making the stories and telling a brilliant story that I'm really proud of. The next thing that gets me the most excited, even before people reading it, is what is the value of this product I'm creating? What is the value that I'm creating within a market space, right? And what's the value that I can create back for my company and my team that works so hard, right? To create this content, to make this book. How do I keep these lights on? But beyond how do I keep this lights on, how do I make the next Disney fully from indigenous story, holding massive ownership within the continent, right? And we begin to check out and digest numbers, and you begin to see that the total market space is about $2.4 billion, and that's looking at it lightly, right? The space that Vortex can tap into, or any creator that is doing it, that is creating comic books with digital scale in mind, is 1.2 billion, right? And then the serviceable obtainable market, that's like the least market that you can tap into, within your jurisdiction or within your space. In my case, looking at African readers, but off the back of African readers tapping into the diaspora is about $22.6 million, right? And when you begin to share these numbers, of course, backing it up with the content you have, or backing it up with an appropriate business plan, this is investment worthy, right? You begin to think about, this is not just comics anymore, right? There's a reason why Webtoons is as big as Webtoons is, does anybody know Webtoons? Okay. We don't have a lot of nerds in this class, do we? Okay. It's okay. It's all right. No judgment. I'm not judging. I'm not judging. Um, um, uh, well, when you begin to think about Webtoons, it's a digital platform where there's a vertical scroll and you get to read comic books. And they created this new way of reading comic books where it's not just panel to panel like the traditional way, right? This is Burka. Burka is a traditional comic book from Belgium, right? I really love it because it has no words. It's universal as hell. Um, it just has a sequence of images, right? So these are traditional comic books. You're reading from panel to panel, but in a webtoon, it's just an infinite scroll where those panels are on a vertical line and you just scroll up. And it changed the way people read. It's kind of like the Instagram of reading comics in a way, right? And that kind of struck gold, in that space, and turn into $1 million business, right? And they have tons and tons and millions of readers, and now they're converting a lot of their IPs into Netflix originals, and doubling back on that money, right? So the market is huge. Of course, looking at direct competitors in this slide, which is intended for my investors, but what this does here is that it also gives you a scope of what people are doing in my space within the continent, and what people are doing in my space all over the world, right? Comic Republic, massive publisher in Nigeria, doing amazing, publishing a ton of comic books, is run by a brilliant mind called Jide Martins. You can check that out. Zebra Comics in Cameroon. They do both Francophone and Anglophone comic books. A lot of countries within the continent of Africa are divided into two lingual francas, English speaking, French speaking, a bit of Portuguese, Spanish in there in tiny pockets, but not a lot. But it's majorly English and French speaking. And Cameroon is kind of like a sweet spot because the country is divided into both English speaking and French speaking. They fight about it a lot, but if they knew the strength they had, they probably would have stopped fighting like maybe 30 decades ago, because that's the strongest position you can be in, right? To actually like flip the script. But there's Black Sands, which is an American publisher. Some of you might have heard of them. I think they're based out somewhere in LA. They're doing amazing. The Saturday AM as well, out there in America, making diaspora comics, making comics of African origin, and doing some really, really dope stuff, right? When you think about the international space, there's Webtoons, which I just mentioned, which is on top of the food chain in terms of making money from this business. There's Tapas, which is an Asian company, which was then acquired by Americans, and I think is crashing out of business now. But they had a good run, right? And then of course we have the Marvel, the DC, the Valiant comics, the Image comics. We all know Marvel and DC, right? Okay, 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 great. Okay, so I'm going to use more Marvel and DC examples now. Silly me, right? So I think basically who are doing amazing as well. Of course, taking that entire franchise and pushing it into the movie business was one of the biggest plays they had, right? I think Marvel, the acquisition of Marvel and the acquisition of LucasArts by Disney has been some of the best business plays that has happened in the media in the last decade, right? The amount of value they've been able to create from that has been existential, right? And the amount of art and storytelling that they've been able to tell, the amount of diversity that they've been able to grow into, like, partnerships like that created the phenomenon of the Black Panther movies that we know of today, the whole Chadwick Boseman effect, right? When you think about Miss Marvel, looking at that first female Hispanic character, that wouldn't have happened. When you think about I can't remember the one with the rings, where Marvel was able to, pivot into, Japanese culture, and, it keeps going on and on. And I don't know if you've seen this cartoon on Netflix called Treso. It's based off Indonesian culture. So it kind of uh, dives into that as well. So I think we've kind of touched in through on mostly everything. I really just wanted to jump in on comic books on this first, like, getting to know you guys. So I think I'm gonna leave it open to questions if you guys have any. And I'm excited to, indulge you on any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for that great lecture. I know you have a lot of things to say, but because of the time, so we are so sorry about that. So
Okay.
I'll be looking at the possibilities of you still having some times with us, to talk about the animation aspect of what you do as well before the end of the class
Yeah.
in April. Yeah, so the class is gonna come to an end by I think April ending. So we're gonna look at the possibilities of bringing you to also talk about that animation aspect as well. So. And thank you so much. So now the floor is open for questions, for our guest lecturer. Thank you. Yeah.
I know you said that a big demographic for the comics ranges from like 15 to 35 plus. I also noticed though that on one of like the age demographic things on one of the earlier comic series you showed us was 7 plus. So I was wondering if there was kind of that younger end to it too, since it can expand up as far as it can go. Does it also go in the other direction? Because I think it's really cool that it does target such a like wide, diverse range of ages. Because I know like growing up, I wasn't allowed to read like Marvel comics when I was super young because a lot of like the more explicit topics in them. So I was wondering if there was like that younger audience.
Absolutely. Thanks for your question. I mean, there is a younger audience. Like when we say 15 in that document, it's even because we're thinking about people that kind of have access to pay for a $5 subscription, right? But yeah, we make comic books for much younger audiences that are even like age locked, so they don't get to experience some of the more explicit content that we may have, because originally the genre of comic books wasn't made for kids, right? When you think about characters like Batman, ain't no way Batman is for like kids. Like, he's this depressed billionaire that goes around kicking people's ass, right? And, you think about like uh Spawn or The Punisher, right? So yeah, we do make comic books that are for younger people because we feel like the genre is a beautiful experience, because comic books are literature, right? It's not just pictorial. It's you get to read, and you also get to have this image, visual experience while you're reading, and it's a really great way to um, uh, encourage a reading experience amongst a younger audience. So we try to make comic books that are suitable for that age as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, while the next person is actually, preparing for the question, because everybody's going to ask questions today. So, I hope time permits. Yeah. So, the question I have, I'm glad that you talked about the aspect of the diaspora, and trying to also like the diaspora is one of the very important influence, or yeah, it has a very great influence on your work because of the audience. You are also focusing on the audience in the diaspora and all that. Yeah. So coming to the character, that you present in all these comic books, do you have anything like maybe conflicting ideas of representation in terms of, okay, maybe you want to represent a particular character and you think maybe those people in Africa may think that, oh, this character is not African enough, or those in the diaspora may think, oh, it's too like it's too Western or not African enough and all that. Because last week, not just last week, Monday we read, a reading that was actually on a kind of African game, and there are lots of controversy about the representations of the character. Like the audience on African soil believe that those characters are too westernized. Well, for me, I think the targeted audience by the producers are actually those in the diaspora. So have you ever had this kind of conflict of representation, whatever, in your productions? Thank you.
So basically, I think your question is saying like, are there some times where like Western influences show way too much within our storytelling?
Not really, okay, yeah, not really about showing or about the way you have represented, about the way your audience have actually seen those things. Has there ever been a kind of questions like, oh, this is too African or this is too Western, you know?
Uh,
Yeah.
or um,
Oh my God,
well,
you are
you
breaking.
know, can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah, yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I would say like definitely when we first started our comic book journey within this, when we are the early books that we used to publish, which was called the first generation. Um, a lot of our characters wear spandex, right? Because that was an ode to the superhero comics, right? So we had characters like Strike Guard. We had characters like June 12, which had like this tight spandex going on. And then you can see their abs ripping through the latex and, the muscles and the mask with the half mask cowl. And, one day I was like sitting down with a design team and I was like, you know what? I hate how this character looks, you know, and because not like there's anything wrong with that look, but it wasn't just us, right? Yes, we did get some comments that would compare, sometimes in an endearing way, like, oh wow, this character is really cool. It reminds me of Black Lightning, you know, and I'm like, that's not what I want to hear, right? And yeah, yeah. And uh um I began to we got an article that featured us on Comic Book Resources, which is one of the biggest comic book you know, people that talk about comic books all over the world. And they put a list of Black superhero comics, right? And I saw us on the list at number 8, Strike Guard, and it was really amazing. Everybody was like going crazy, like, yo, we did it. We finally got seen by these guys. So cool. And in my head, I'm just looking at it and I'm like, wow, this character looks a lot like the rest of these characters that are from the States, right? And I realized that, we still had a lot of work to do to make these comic books more unapologetically, irrevocably, frustratingly, atrociously um African, right? There was so much more to do, like, and that's when we started diving deeper into, how could we do this? It changed our whole storytelling because we started to look deeper into the masquerades because we liked that character design. We liked the way the masquerade looked. And we're like, if I want a superhero character, I want him to look like an AO masquerade. I want him to run, and when he runs through the wall, he just disappears, but he's holding his cap with a stick, and with a stick he can spin around and take out people, right? And it began to, like, that comparison, though from a positive perspective, inspired us to dive deeper, to be more unapologetically African, right? Because African stories are not just um, for Africans. They are stories for the world. And it was important for us to be confident in our storytelling, be confident that our cultures and our mythologies were not just items that could be consumed by us alone, but could be exported, have been exported since the beginning of time, and we're only just continuing prevalent history.
Thank you so much. That really explains a lot. Yeah. So thank you. Question.
I have a question. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to know a little bit about how you started Vortex because I was reading up a little bit and it said that you didn't originally start with comics or animation in general, but then I think there was like a short film that had been released or something and you got into that. Did you always have an interest in comics and did you want to like, I don't know, did Vortex always have that same mission and did you kind of find comics along the way? Or I was just wondering a little bit about how you got into that.
Um, uh, I would definitely, well, Vortex started as a blog, actually. You know, it started as a blog. I graduated college and I was selling phones. Um, and I went to deliver this phone in some guy's office and he gave me a job. And because of that job, I had access to this computer because I didn't have a personal computer of my own. Um, and I started, and when and because I was working there, I'll work late at night so I could just, be on the computer and type and send whatever, and then I started to blog, and I'll blog about everything, music, food, travel. And the blog was called vortex247.com, which is the name of the same website where we have all the comics. And I think one day I discovered this Tumblr account with a lot of comic books posted, and it was a comic book called Momujuju. But before then, I'd already slowly started getting into comics, but I wasn't really into comics. I was more into music than anything else, if I would say, right? And and then when I found this Tumblr, I was like, okay, wow, there could be a reading experience that's digital. And I got really hooked and I really liked it. And I was like, okay, this is cool. So we started getting permission from comic book creators to put their comic books as a blog post and people can read it every week, and we realized that that was getting a lot of traction. That was getting a lot of traffic. And I met up with this DJ that had a tattoo on his face. His name is DJ Sose. And we were talking. I think we were having a smoke by the waterside, right? And we were talking, and then it was like, yo, and I was like, yo, bro, I think your voice would be really dope as a cartoon character. Like you're hilarious. And he was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I think it'll be hilarious. And I remember that when I was making music back in college, there was a friend of mine that made an animated music video of my song. I forced him to make it. He hated my song. My music was trash, you know, but I kind of forced him into making this music video for me. And I told him like, yo, you know what? I'm gonna bring a project that's gonna make you money one day. And he ended up being my head of animation, right? All these years later. So I'm talking to DJ Sose and I'm like, you know what, dude, I think like it would be really dope if we make a short animation series on YouTube with two newscasters giving the wacky version of the news that's happening around Africa. And it was like, yeah, that'd be dope. I could do the voice of both of them. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's totally sick. I thought so. So I called my friend and he says like, sure, yeah, I'll be down for it. And then we made this first 3 episodes. And I kind of never went back after that. I just literally stopped blogging about everything else. I just started blogging about comics and animation. And eventually we got a little money. We paid a developer and he started putting the comic books properly, in a PDF reader so people could read. And it was all free back then, all free. Videos were on YouTube, comics were for free on Isu. We just upload it on Isu, which is a PDF reader, and then we take that embedded code and put it in the blog so people can read it from our website, but they're actually reading it off Isu. And I did that for like 2 years and, made a little more money. And then we built our own website where we could actually, people could still read and we're able to take their emails and collect some data. And during the lockdown, we launched a subscription service and said like, okay, we don't have any money to do this anymore. My other job that I was working at, I can't do that no more. Because we used to start this little training program for kids in high school for animation, like an extracurricular program. And we couldn't do that anymore during the lockdown, right? And I was like, okay, are you guys gonna pay $5? Then it was $3. I think then it was $2. It's $5 now. I was like, are you guys gonna pay $2 every month to read the same comic books that we've been uploading? We're gonna upload some more. And it worked, you know. Subscriptions started coming in, and then we're like, okay, wow, this is a real business, right? This is working. And then commissions started coming in. People would holler at us for commissions. Oh, I'm trying to make this comic book. And then we tell them like, we would not just make this comic book for you, but we can publish it too and open you up to our audience. So people were paying us to make comics for them and put it on our platform, which is like kind of crazy because we're supposed to like pay licensing for that, right? But just because there was a gap in the market and we were providing for that gap, just publishing comic books became a value-added service, right? And that's the importance of looking at art as as uh, as a as a cushion to fill in the space, to fill in spaces that are just open, because open spaces only create room for misinterpretation, and open spaces only create room for misinformation, and only create room for another person telling your story, right? And we were able to show people that you can tell your story at no cost without having to worry about printers or printing these comics or distribution. And the world was your oyster, right? And they tapped into that and they supported us. And I think, you know, a little bit of grace, a little bit of luck, um, a little bit of timing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed, the responses, the talk, and all that. So, but unfortunately, we don't really have much time. So,
Yeah,
we need to like, end the class now.
yeah,
So, and I really appreciate that. Like I said, I'm going to work out when it's going to be convenient, for both of us to like for us for the class and also for you to bring you to also talk about the animation aspect, of your
yeah.
yeah, because that's also very, very important for us to, to know about. Yeah. So thank you so much, Mr. Somto Ajuluchuku. By the way, do you want to tell us the meaning of Ajuluchuku? Yeah, before we
Uh,
go.
Ajuluchukwu means did they ask God? So
They
it's like
ask
asking the
God.
people, did they ask God? Like,
Okay,
did we ask? Right.
we
So
ask God.
Ajuluchukwu,
Okay.
yeah. So it depends on how you say it. You say it in four ways and it has like four different meanings. You know African names, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so but it's like did they ask God? So it's like, okay, so you want to make that comic, did you ask God? Right? So it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, so that's kind of what it means. Yeah.
I see. That's
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your coming. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We will, yeah,
Thank you guys for being part of the class and
yeah,
thank you, Jimga, for inviting me. I
yeah,
really appreciate you.
yeah,
I'm honored to like hang out with you guys and share.
yeah. You're welcome. Thank you. Bye. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, guys. See you on Monday, right? And if you have any question, you can send me an email if you have any clarification and all that. Yeah. So see you on Monday. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Yeah. Have a great day. Yeah.